Good morning. There's a natural turbulence which occurs in nature when you forcibly move from one phase space to another, like the immediate period before breaking through the sound barrier. This is only uncertain or chaotic if you're relying on the evidence of your senses rather than knowing where you have come from and where you are going and what you intend to create on the other side. That's what we're doing here at Promethean Action. Hopefully, we're guides showing you clearly and graphically where we're all coming from, but most essentially, where we're going. The enemies of this nation, namely the media, the intelligence community narrative managers, Jerome Powell at the Fed, his co conspirator in wrecking the U.S. economy, former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and their bankster and private equity friends, are seeking to capitalize on that turbulence by further wrecking the economy itself in the hopes of blaming it on the chaotic and reckless Donald Trump, in their words, and his destructive tariff policy. In reality, he's simply trying to right the ship which they otherwise would destroy. In Canada, what I call the monster central banker of central bankers, Mark Carney, who champions the economic destruction which has occurred in the world during the last 30 years through outsourcing in pursuit of the cheapest labor possible and killing off excess population through forever wars and epidemics, says he is running to be Canada's permanent viceroy in order to destroy Donald Trump and build a defense against America itself right on our borders. Similar nonsense comes from the dying servants of that corrupt order in Europe, their elites. It's all a big lie, and the American people so far aren't falling for it. The latest polling shows Trump at an approval rating climbing as Americans accept turbulence as the necessary ingredient in breaking with a corrupt and dying old world and embracing both the excitement and uncertainty which comes from building the future. We are coming from a very broken economy, which was further broken during the Biden administration by the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department acting in concert to make us debt slaves to world empire. We are coming from a coup d'etat, a color revolution directed at ourselves and our president for 10 years, conducted by the modern British financial empire in which we almost lost our country, and yet another American president killed by the hand of foreign directed assassination. Like all such modern hybrid warfare, it was a coup mostly conducted by lawyers with complicit judges, along with complicit universities, nursing and creating young Jacobin street forces, and a culture designed to acquiesce in censorship and the totalitarian measures which accompanied COVID. In the news today, Pope Francis had died. Mourned cheaply, if you read the news, by King Charles and Camilla, based on his advocacy for the Green New Deal, open borders, and similar imperial policies. I find it interesting that Klaus Schwab, of the same age, 88, resigned from the World Economic Forum, also today, effective immediately. Peace negotiations on the Ukraine war and on the Middle East are at a critical point, and the entrenched warmongers are in a fury, particularly aiming their fire at Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and his effort to align the captured and imperial Pentagon with American interests. Many countries are in D.C. this week for the annual meeting of the IMF and World Bank. I looked at the agendas and they remain stuck in that old world order before Donald Trump. Band-aid, so-called sustainable and primitive development programs, climate religion, continued looting, whether by the Chinese or the bandits of finance capital of the developing world, albeit with dripping amounts of fake compassion. We expect that the president and his advisors will take advantage of this to begin to ink major trade deals. We'll cover these stories in short form here and in more depth on the website. On the financial front, the Trump reordering of the U.S. and world economy continues. Last week, the president signed executive orders reviving the American shipbuilding industry, supporting the seafood industry and commercial fishing in the Pacific Ocean, and continued his revised regulations for federal contractors, particularly those involved in the Pentagon and defense. The latter administrative actions will have a major impact on government spending, as only a few select potential contractors in defense and other areas can presently afford to manage the current morass of regulations, resulting in centralized, almost cartelized type companies contracting to the federal government who overcharge the government massively. The China reaction to the tariffs continues, with word this morning that China is pulling its investments out of American hedge funds and private equity behemoths like the Carlyle Group and Blackstone. At the same time, foreign investors are fleeing the American housing market, along with the hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants. That and the lack of building new housing has caused housing costs to become a leading factor in inflation under the previous regime. That is uncontrolled immigration and private investors buying up all of the existing stocks. The stock market continues deflating after Federal Chair Powell announced on Friday that the Fed would not step in to halt the bursting of the bubble that Joe Biden and Barack Obama built. In short, if you are for building a productive economy for the future, you're pretty happy now. If you're stuck in the predatory financial world we built again after it crashed in 2008, you're in dead panic. Now, regarding the war for peace, as I call it, by Donald Trump. The Russians published a very interesting piece at the end of last week, saying that Europe historically has been prone to building totalitarian systems instead of doing the will of its people, and hailing the American Revolution and Russia's former alliance with the United States, and noting that the European tendency toward repeatedly building totalitarian states has been stoked at all times by the British, not the people of England, but the British Empire. So it is with the insistence of the Europeans now that the war in Ukraine must be continued. They stand in the way of a very concrete peace proposal and realistic peace proposal by the Trump administration, which recognizes the military facts on the ground, gives Russia the territories it controls and has controlled historically, and creates the basis for joint cooperation in rebuilding Ukraine. Similarly, the talks with Iran are proceeding despite the hysteria of the current government of Israel and most of the pundits who like to comment and diss Donald Trump. And it does look like an agreement can be worked out rather than yet another stupid war. Iran and Saudi Arabia have been meeting, overcoming the schism in Islam, which has been exploited for centuries by the British and resulted in much current warfare in that troubled region. Russia, as we have thought, is playing a key role in bringing this peace negotiation into being. Thus, the current press scandals manufactured around Pete Hegseth represent the rearguard reaction to this by those who still wish to control the Pentagon, keeping it in a state of rebellion against the president, as it was during Trump's first administration and as it remained under Biden, and to continue the Pentagon's role in being the chief enforcement mechanism for the British imperial financial empire. Now, the Supreme Court on Friday, in a bizarre middle-of-the-night emergency decision, blocked President Trump's further deportation of members of the Venezuelan murder gang called Tren de Aragua. At the same time, a Biden leftover branch of the intelligence community, the National Intelligence Council, said the president was all wet when he said that gang functions as a tool of the Venezuelan government. Both the Supreme Court decision and the announcement by this rogue intelligence council are pure sophistries, justifying Shakespeare's famous verdict about lawyers delivered in the play Henry VI, Part 2. Trump's declaration of emergency and use of the Alien Enemies Act is based on the simple fact that Trendria, like MS-13, is a violent and bestial gang of enforcers for the drug cartels. In the case of Venezuela, the key cartel they work for is called Cartel of the Suns and involves the Venezuelan military and its role in moving cocaine from Colombia, along with other synthetic drugs, north to the United States. What is missing in this picture of a legal war between the courts and the president is the Congress. It is a pertinent military fact in this war that the Supreme Court stood mostly silent throughout the coup against the president over the last 10 years, balked at causing any examination of the 2020 election, and is not, under our Constitution, supposed to be performing any type of powerful role. It is also deeply infected, except for a few, by the decadent culture of Washington, D.C., the decadent culture of the nation's law schools, which invented critical race theory, and the corrupt mega law firms who think they run things. In Federalist 78, Alexander Hamilton cited history's long roll of judicial tyrannies, saying that the founders had deliberately created an entity which could only make judgments. It can't enforce them. Like so much else, Congress is defaulting in its role of legislating the righteous cause President Trump has undertaken, deporting violent gang members and criminals, dismantling the drug cartel and its hidden economy. Due process, unless Congress acts now, means that most of these people will stay here because the immigration court system is completely overwhelmed and backed up. And Biden closed down most of the detention facilities here as part of his Trump-proofing exercise. So we'll cover the legislation which Senator Grassley and others are currently crafting to remedy this, but the pressure point is your congressman. You can only accomplish so much by executive orders. So we're still in the turbulent part of the revolution, with the landscape of the future increasingly coming into view. Susan will be with you on Wednesday for the midweek brief, and I'll see you again on Saturday. Again, if you like what we offer here, please go to the website to explore these topics in much more depth and history. Become a member, get active, and contribute. Now more than ever, we have a unique role to play given our history in this domain for over 50 years. We know what it's like to go through this turbulence and come out on the other side. Now is the time for most, as Thomas Paine said, that try men's souls. Be among the patriots who save this nation. Join us in this great adventure. Thanks very much for listening. I'll see you again on Saturday.
Thanks for watching. Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.